What to work on today? I know. Hi everybody, and thank you for joining me today on Glen's Retro Show. Today I'm going to try doing another little hardware hack. I've gotten a bunch of these little MGA little portable game consoles. They're very similar to the Tiger Electronics, as you probably remember when you're a little bit younger. Little LCD screens, but they're kind of neat because they look like little arcade machines. They actually have a working joystick, a couple of buttons, and so forth on them. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, these are pretty neat, and they play one game, and they're okay. I mean, sometimes you get these for maybe $15, but sealed ones, as you can see I have behind me here, they can run you anywhere from $20 to $50, depending on which one it is. And they made quite a few of them. They have Super Breakout, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Missile Command, Centipede, and Pac-Man. And I actually got another one of these that was not working. As a matter of fact, there was nothing in it at all. It was just an empty shell. And so that screen looks like a nice size, and I remembered I had a couple of these Game Princes, and I did a review on these before, and they're actually not too bad. It's a rip-off console from China that plays about 152 NES games. I did a review on it, and I do like them. The screen's bright, good battery life, and they're inexpensive. I spent like $13 for it. But I'm looking at the size of that screen, and the size of that screen, and wondered, maybe I can put this in this. Well, that's what today's episode is all about. So let's go take a look and see how it turned out.
Okay, here we have a Game Prince in a nice color blue. They do come in different colors. And to be honest, I really do like these. For $13, they're pretty neat. It's basically an NES on a chip. It's got about 152 games installed on it. A really nice screen. The volume is quite loud. The buttons are fairly responsive. For me personally, the biggest fault is this controller here. These are individual buttons, not an actual true direction pad. You get used to it, but it'd be nicer in my opinion if that was a real direction pad. They have a reset button, the speaker out, start pause button, a turbo button for the A, so you can press this for single. If you press this down, an A will be turbotized, I guess you would call it, and a B button. Now some people have a fault with this, and I do as well, because if you're playing a game like Super Mario Brothers, which is installed on the Game Prince, the buttons are backwards. But since we're doing a project now where we're hacking it, we can easily rectify that. Now to get inside the Game Prince, it's actually extremely easy. Just get a Phillips head screwdriver and take out 4 screws, and the machine will open up nice and easy. You can see in here, here's the battery compartment with our positive and negative going into the secondary board here. There's the main board, which houses the processor, the 152 games and ROM, an AV out. Now when I was working on it, I was trying to remove it, and I was being a little too rough, and I did break this, so I'm not going to be doing this in this particular video. But I can always put a jack on here back and do an AV out on it. The volume control is right here. And you have four, it's actually 8 wires going across here to a secondary board with more controls, which is your A, B, turbo button, your start button over there, and your volume. So that's pretty much it. The system is very easy to get inside. The screen itself is right here, and everything kind of comes out very, very easy. So getting the guts out of the Game Prince, very easy to do. Just take out 4 screws. Actually, you do have to take out 1, 2, 3, 4 more to pull out the actual hardware, but that's it. So once you take out the 4 main screws, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 more internal screws, and everything comes out nice and easy. Okay, once you get the machine open and you remove all the screws, the one thing you need to do is just make 8 wires to extend what was there previously. Before, it only came to about here. So I almost pretty much doubled the length of cord just to give me more room to work. And you do have to be careful. These particular motherboards are not the most expensive, obviously. And they can be very susceptible to solder damage with heat. So try using as low a heat as you can to melt your solder when working on it. And use some nice flux. Otherwise, you can possibly burn and damage these connectors on here. I'm trying to go zoom in a little bit here and get a little bit closer to it. So you can see it's with these particular type of boards, it's a little hard to get a good solder on there, but just take your time and you make a good contact on it. Once that's all done, we can start putting this actually inside MGA Breakout or whatever unit that you do have. They're all pretty much the same. What I could say for sure is that the Breakout only has left and right wire to the board. We'll get more into that a little bit later. It's easy enough to get around it. But you can see this board is fairly easy. All your buttons are right here. We're going to remove the silicone pads here to get right down to the actual copper points. But that's it. So let's get started installing this. You can see here's Super Mario Brothers, which people complain about the A and B buttons, but we'll swap them. But it does have a really nice crisp screen. And again, for like $13, even leaving it as it is, it's a fun little toy. But we're going to make it a little bit better. Here's just another angle of it here, and here is the shell of the Breakout. Now this I had gotten off of eBay, and it looks like someone tried doing this already. The screen actually only came to here straight across, and I thought I was going to have to cut it down. Whoever this was probably had a similar idea, maybe trying to use a Raspberry Pi, and I may do that in a future one, but the space is very, very tight, which is why I decided to go with the Game Prince. So he'd already cut this down and put a piece of glass here and used crazy glue. I had to clean this all up, and I'll show you how I did that, because all this crazy glue kind of really ruined the display. And some of the decals had come off already. So anyway, I got this. It came with just the shell and the control panel, which is all I really cared about. I got it for $1. So it was a pretty good deal for me. So let's start trying to get this inside this and see if we can make something good out of it. Okay, so here's the display of the Game Prince sitting inside the MGA Breakout. And when I got the purchase from eBay for $1, I basically got the 2 halves, the back, the battery cover, and the front, and the control panel, which is all I really cared about anyway. And whoever worked on it already cut a few areas in this case, which actually worked to my advantage for the most part, but I'll get into one area where he cut some of the screw holes out, which is a little bit of a problem, but I'm going to put some maybe magnets to hold it together. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So I also cut out the battery pack in the Game Prince just so I can fire this up. And basically what I did was, the display is sitting right in the area on the Breakout. And I used some hot glue just to tack it down to make sure it's centered. You can see my cable is longer here, so I'm able to get this working out of the way. And basically the hardest part, well, not the hardest part, but a hard part was this was actually facing the other way. So I had to be able to flip it and bend it back without damaging this. And there was some foam that I was able to take out, which gave me just enough slack, and literally I'm talking just enough to flip it. I am going to put hot glue here just to give it some extra strength, because right now the only thing holding this on are the solder points between this board and the display, and it's probably not the most robust area, but if you take your time, there is just enough room to flip this around, which I had to do to make this work. Now, could I have unsoldered all these points and made a cable like this for display? Probably. A chance of ruining it, probably pretty good as well. So I was fortunate I was able to do it this way without having to trying to desolder this display and doing a whole bunch of resolders with a cable like this. So I got very lucky with that. So you can see how everything's kind of sitting in right now, and the biggest part was here because I already have a control panel which will fit in its normal spot. So I'm just here testing it, fired it up, make sure it still works. And again, whoever got this, all these decals had come off, but he did ship them to me, so I had them. And he had already cut this area down. This was originally maybe about here coming across. So he cut a portion off, but it was my advantage because it actually fits the screen perfectly. What was not to my advantage was he did put a piece of plastic in here as a glass front end, which probably wasn't needed. But in doing so, he used crazy glue, and there's a whole bunch of like glue residue on the sides. But again, I'll show you later how I took care of that and got it to look pretty good. So here's a frontal view. We can see the Donkey Kong, the NES Donkey Kong is being played here, and the screen is a perfect fit. Now the LED lighting for the displays on the sides, you do kind of see it a little bit brighter there, but the camera picks it up more than you would see it in person. And again, you could see he had cut right about here down. So I actually could have left a little bit less. It made the display come right here and it looked even better, because I could have shifted this up a little bit more. But it was okay. It still worked and looked fine. There was less cutting I had to do. I probably would have done a better job, but that's okay. It was for $1 and for a little test project, and it worked out okay. Now you see from a slightly different angle, you really can't see that backlighting bad there at all. And again, in person, it's really not noticeable. Just the camera picked it up a little bit more than I did. And again, different angle. Again, display does tend to wash out when you turn it this way, but in normal play, you'll never notice this. You can see the artwork is still here. The audio jack is here, the potentiometer for the audio. And so the thing we need to start doing next is the controls, because that's it. Basically, you're going to just take the screen and the controller, bend it, and fit it. And it really looks pretty nice, I gotta say. Okay, now we're going to get into the controller part, where we're going to take the controls from the Game Prince and have the control board from the MGA Breakout well, take control of the Game Prince. So you can see here is the board for that, and there's a bunch of buttons on here. Now the MGA makes a bunch of different little consoles: Breakout, Space Invaders, Asteroids, Pac-Man, Missile Command, and each one is probably slightly different. Now in the particular Breakout board, the left and right are used in Breakout, so those are actually wired. They actually put the micro switches in for up and down, but they are not attached to anything. But again, we can work around that. We have a start button here. The on-off buttons in the Breakout are basically the same button. Now you can cut traces and separate these two, but again, this video I didn't want to do that. I might do that in a future episode. So right now these are still tied together. We have a sound and pause button. These two are separated, and then we have a start button, which is also isolated. So that's really it. So we're going to basically translate all these controls, or at least most of them, to go and be a physical button on the Game Prince. And here's a back view of that. Again, the boards they use are not the most highest quality, as well as the copper points they use for the solder joints. So use a low wattage solder and a good flux, and try not to heat them up too much. If you do, you're probably going to burn them and melt them. And again, you can probably work around them, but why make more of a hassle for yourself? But again, in the Breakout, only left and right were actually wired to this area here, and then all the other wires. The up and down were not wired, but there was a micro switch put in place, so we were still able to take advantage of up and down, left and right because of that. So you can see here, I'm soldering the wires onto it here, and you can see I'm using these buttons here for all the switches as well as left and right, but I simply soldered a wire to here. This is actually down. When you press up, that's not your up, that's actually your down, and your up, it's reversed. So you can see I simply soldered to one end of the micro switch. The other one is still going to ground, so ground is already covered, just not the actual position for down. And I soldered one here for up. So when you press up, this micro switch gets translated as an up register, and when you pull down, this one is your down. That translates that as well. So basically, after looking at the two boards on the Game Prince and then on the MGA, this is what I had come up with. I've numbered this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, down, up. Now you can solder to either one of these two. I actually soldered here and here, but I wrote up and down there because there was room. So basically, the monitor board, which is the one that has the actual display attached to it, and it's got the processor and the RAM chips, we have 5 leads coming off of that. The first one we're going to move is the start button. So your start is going to go to pin 1. So your start button from the display board will go here. The ground, I actually took it from originally from the start button, but I had issues with that, and I'll show you later where I actually pulled that from. But your ground will come to this one right here. That's going to translate to all the buttons on here for their ground. Now the turbo button on the monitor board, there's no correlating button. I could have probably isolated one of these buttons to make it a turbo button, but I didn't. I simply put a new switch on it and put it on the back, which I'll show you later in the video. The fourth wire we're going to do is our A button. So A is going to go to 7, which is here, and then B is to 6. And we're doing that so we can reverse the buttons to be proper with Mario Brothers. So the run and jump buttons are where they're supposed to be and not reversed. If you like them reversed, you can swap these around any way you like. Now on the Joy board, which is the speaker and power board, we need 5 leads for there as well. The reset button is going to go to pin 5. The up button, there's no spot here, so your up button is going to go, you can solder to here or to here. So your wires have to come around to the front to solder to one of these two spots. The left is your 3 button, so when we go left, you go to this one here. Your down can go to either one of these two over here, and then your right will go to pin 4. So once you solder all those up, you get something that kind of looks like this. You have to be very careful again. You want to make sure you don't bridge any of these pads, because one part is the button, the other part is going to be your ground. See if we can zoom in here a little bit here for you guys. So you can see, just put a little flux down, a tiny dot of solder, and then you can put your wire in when you heat it up. Again, be very careful, don't overheat it. But one side is your button, the other side is your ground pad. But we're going to pull ground from somewhere else entirely, which we'll get to a little bit later. But you can see here, just make sure when you put this in, you're not bridging the pads anywhere. Once you do that, you want to do that to all your buttons. So here's our A button, our B button, and this is our turbo A button. And you can see here, see if I can zoom out just a smidgen here. You can see that the display here, the cable would have come across this way, and that's kind of being really strained. But once it settles in, just put some hot glue over here. Not going to be doing any of these buttons, so it's test pads, so it's okay. Just put some hot glue down here just to help with the tension. And then it shouldn't be any problem being folded around in this direction. So originally what I had done was I took my buttons from the lower, and then I was taking the ground from the upper in this location. And I was having very sporadic responses. I'm not sure quite why that was happening, but I wasn't getting good ground for it. So I have a picture of another location I took ground from. It's actually here. Took some while to find out which one of these buttons. And of course I was starting to panic, because when I pulled the display over, there's a whole bunch of buttons, or I say pads over here, that have been soldered to for controls between the two boards. I thought maybe I covered the ground wire. I'm like, oh my god, how am I going to get to it now? But I lucked out. I was able to get ground right down here. But again, just another shot of all the spots here where the solder's been taken down. And you can see here's our control panel with all of our wires, including, you can see there's 2 wires coming from the front over here, which was necessary to get our up and down on our joystick. Just has soldered right to there and right to there, and everyone else is soldered on the back, so it makes that nice and clean. And you can see we have our volume potentiometer soldered on. I just extended that out as well. I removed it from the board and soldered out because I'm going to put it in a new spot. And you can see all of our joystick buttons here are also soldered on. And remember, we're also going to put a lot of hot glue on these to relieve stress on any of these soldered down locations over here. And you can see you got to be very careful. I got a little burn mark here. These boards are very thin, very delicate. They're not a high quality computer PCB, so take your time. And you can see right now it is on. Just about making sure I was doing some testing with the controls, make sure that they worked, and they did. You can see I have some little flux pen here, and you definitely want to make sure you have a helping hands. You could probably do it without it, but man, it's gonna be really difficult. I've done it without helping hands in the past, and it's a big pain. Just spend a couple of dollars, get some nice helping hands to give you a hand doing your work. And again, you can see all the wires being brought over. Doesn't have to look too elegant at this point. Just for testing, make sure everything works okay. And again, there I am, and here's Mr. Hot Glue. This is going to be a big friend. You'll be using that a lot to make sure all your wires don't get pulled and damaged in any way. And you're probably going to want some type of magnifying glasses. These are ones I had previously. I have a new pair now. My friend Charles, who does the buzz-off kits, had given me a recommendation of a better pair of magnifying glasses with a light instead of looking like this. And a good friend of mine, Mary Parker, actually gifted me that particular pair of glasses. So thank you to Charles and to Mary on both of those tips. So again, just in that position, you can see all the wires have been soldered down onto them. This is the main on-off switch for the Game Prince. I left this in place. I was trying to desolder it, and to be honest, it was starting to look like it was going to break the board, so I left it alone. I left this in the on position, and we'll get into how I got around that a little bit later. Again, just another shot. You got to make sure, again, all your spots are proper. Now you can see up here, I was doing a lot of testing. Again, I was having a lot of ground problems, and if I don't have a good ground, none of the buttons were going to work and be translated to the Game Prince. You have to have a good solid ground because they're all short to ground. So I just basically put another button on here just for testing purposes, and it was working fine. I never really found out why I was not getting a good ground to my new control system, but I found a way around it. So it's not too big a deal. This would have been simpler, going from one pad here, deciding onto this pad, that would have been fine and dandy. But it actually added a few days worth of head scratching. So you can see I put a little button here to act as my start button to try and figure out what was going on with the ground, and this worked perfectly fine. When I went to here, I could not get the start to work or the controls here to work reliably, and I determined it was ground, and I eventually found out how to get around that by changing it from getting ground from here, and I went down to the very first pin here. So thankfully it's out of the way of the display. But once I pulled ground from here, everything worked perfectly. Again, I don't know why this was giving me a problem. If I touched here with the original grommet pad that came with it, it worked fine. And when I put a switch on here, directly went fine. But when I tried using everything through it, it just refused. So there must have been some capacitance or something else going on that I wasn't strong enough for all the other buttons to go through, which is possible. But when I went to here, I had a good ground. And again, some hot glue, make sure all my display stays in place. And you can see I did have to cut out a little area here to make this display fit in fine. But the previous person had cut out the screw holes to hold the case together. You see there's two screw holes down here. So with these two here, this display is not staying closed. So I simply put in a nice magnet here and magnet here, and actually put it on the other side, and it holds it together pretty good. So I'm actually pretty happy that it worked out. Again, just another shot. You can see the volume potentiometer where I removed it from where it was and extended it out. Again, you can see the ground and then the other parts of the potentiometer here. This is your joystick area, up, down, left, and right. Power comes into here as well, over here. Again, it was just another testing over here, and everything seemed now that I was pulling ground from here. All my controls work. So my up, down, left, and right, my start button over here, my A and B button over. I'm sorry, this is my reset, my start. A and B buttons worked over here. These two at this time weren't being used, I don't think. Again, this was just my test to ground, and I never found out why. My only guess is maybe there was some capacitance. There wasn't enough to send all the controls to this one pad. So I basically got the ground from over here. So this was no longer needed, and this was removed. So then the next phase was to make everything fit in here properly. Now the AB button board, which is attached to the display, and the start button, I simply folded over and put some hot glue down to hold this all in place. I laid another thin bead of hot glue on the board out of the way to act as basically a shelf for my joystick board, and then it fit actually right here really nice. It kind of sat in perfectly. Originally I was going to keep the speaker here, but I ended up moving it. It kind of was dumb putting it here. There was actually an audio speaker on the MGA Breakout, and I moved it to that location. This right here is the reset button, temporarily just out of the way. You can see there's 4 screws holding in the joystick, so I put them back in place, and that's it. So the joystick goes right back to its spot where all your buttons are already wired, and you can see lots of hot glue. Hot glue, you can never use too much. You can always take it off later if you don't need it in a spot, but it never hurts anything to put down enough hot glue to hold everything in place. And that's what we did here. A lot of hot glue. Here it is, just from another angle. Again, I put a bead of hot glue underneath here to act like a shelf, and just put some hot wire on all my wires here to make sure they don't get pulled and strained and get yanked out. Okay, so once you have everything pretty much done, the next thing we need to do is power it. Now, the Game Prince runs on 3 AAA batteries, but the Super Breakout only ran on 2 batteries. So the problem is that there was really no way to fit 3 batteries in this area. I did try to see if I could somehow maybe cut a few areas out and cut this up a little bit to get it to fit. So that didn't work. So I was like, well, how am I going to supply power to this little guy? I would like to use like rechargeable batteries. When cutting some of this, you can see I actually warped this a little bit. I could probably use a little heat gun to fix it, but it's not that noticeable. But I was like, how am I going to fit that in here? So I remembered I had a couple of the Adafruit 500C charging circuits. Now, I originally bought these for my Raspberry Pi projects, but I was finding that these were not able to charge the battery while playing. It would actually drain the battery, and then eventually would just shut the machine down because it couldn't supply enough juice. So for this project, though, it was more than adequate. The one thing I needed to do, and a shout out to my friend Aaron Morris, who's helped me a couple of times, the problem is the Adafruits supply 5.2 volts, which is really needed for the Raspberry Pis and the like. But the Game Prince only needs 4.5 volts. So this probably would have burned it out if I put it in. It may have downed the voltage, I don't know. I didn't want to take a chance of burning it out. But he suggested I take one of these N1 4001 diodes. There's a 1 amp 50 volt little diode here. And what it does is when you put it on the positive side and you put the tip here, it pulls the voltage down a little bit. So even though it's 5.2 volts over here, but it gets to this side, it's down to 4.7 volts, which is acceptable within a range of the 4.5 volts the Game Prince does need. And there's some other advantages to doing this too. It's not expensive, but you can put in a lithium polymer type battery, so you can run off a rechargeable battery. You can charge it and use it at the same time. So that's kind of neat. And it has its own power switch. Now, seeing as how I couldn't get the power switch off of the Game Prince without maybe possibly ruining the board, this solved my solution. I'm able to use a rechargeable battery. I can use it on batteries and charge it, or just use it on the battery, or just on external power. I now have an on-off switch I can use again, and I'm able to bring it down the voltage. Now, on the Adafruit, this is really the proper spot to go to, but these two had the voltage as well. My 5 volts was here as well as here, and these two are the grounds. So I figure I'm going to put it here just because. No other reason other than that. So you can see here, my good old helping hands helped me out again. And you can see I am bringing in my 5 volts into where the battery got into the positive, and then the ground over at that location. The battery pack here, normally you would plug in a battery over here. So I had an old battery here from an old cell phone that was 3.7 volts. So I was able to simply solder onto the positive and the negative of the battery, and go into a breakout board over here and plug it in here directly. So it worked out pretty well. And this little battery, although my cell phone would die in probably 5 or 10 minutes, it's been running the Game Prince for about 2.5 hours. So it worked out really well, and it's small and it's thin, which in this particular project, the smaller and thinner the better, because the space, as you can see, is still at a premium even with the small Game Prince being in here. The power switch is going to go over here. This is actually the reset button right here, which I simply put in. There were 2 holes already. I assume these 2 holes as well as these 2 holes were screw holes, but the person had cut them out. So I simply enlarged them just a smidgen to put in my button here. My on-off switch will go here. And actually, I'm making a correction. My on-off switch is going here. My reset button goes here. This is actually the turbo button. The turbo button is here for the A button. And I'm going to relocate the speaker from here to this location here. So here's just another shot. See, again, some hot glue just to make sure your wires don't come off by accident. But we have now 5 volts going down to 4.7 volts, our ground, battery, and this little wire here is for our on-off switch. So we can see turbo button over here. We can see the battery is going to fit right in this location here. I had to flip it up a little bit, but I'll show you, and hot glue it. Again, gotta love that hot glue. And then the Adafruit 500C, I'm going to double side tape to the battery itself. Now the battery compartment, I did cut out a little bit more. Again, the person who had this before me had already cut it out, so I don't know what he was doing with it. But I just shaved this down nice and smooth, and I actually had to trim this a little bit to get inside a little area here so the boards didn't hit it. Exactly this spot right here. So this here, going back one frame, this here I had to trim a little bit so it would fit in this little notch right here. So it still worked out. And again, I wouldn't need to use this on-off power switch. And we're going to put the battery pack laying down right here. And then the Adafruit 500C will be right on top of that. Now here is the back of the board. You can see I relocated my speaker with some hot glue. This here is my reset button. This is my turbo button. And the on-off switch I put in this hole right here. This was already cut out. This was the battery area. The person who sold this on eBay had done that already. I simply flattened it out a little bit more, trimmed it down a little bit more. Okay, once again, we can see the unit on its back. We can see the 2 motherboards, the power switch. This is the potentiometer for the volume control, which I'm going to put in the battery door area on the back of the MGA unit here. You can see, once again, where I was pulling ground from on this board here, which is the fire button, the AB button board display. I'm going to feed some hot glue here just to give a little more strength to the ribbon cable for the monitor. But importantly, you can see here's the battery. It's a little end battery for a little Sony camera that I have. 3.7 volts. Now on my phone, it only lasted a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes of doing video recording. But in this, so far, it's been giving me a couple of hours easy. And I just used a little drop of hot glue here, here, and here on the joystick micro switch area, just to keep it in place. It's fine. It's a light little battery, and this cover won't be interfered with at all. And we can see here, once again, getting a little more of the items put in. Again, so you can see a lot of hot glue is needed for this. The battery compartment I didn't remove. This is actually already removed from the person who was working on this beforehand. I just cleaned up a little bit more because I'm going to put the potentiometer right here. And you can see here is the turbo button over here, the power switch, and then up here is the reset button and the speaker. And you can see I used some double-sided tape here on the Adafruit 500C charger. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a small old cell phone charger cable, plug it into here, and cut off the ends. And I have a little micro USB I'm going to put on the back of the door here. We'll see that in a minute. But again, you can see everything is pretty much in place, sitting pretty well. Again, you can see the 2 screw holes here that'll close the bottom half. The 2 top ones were already removed from the previous guy working on this, whoever that was. So what I did, I took a magnet, put one here, and another magnet here and here to give a really strong, tight click. So that'll close and holds pretty well. And again, this power switch is left in the on position. It won't be used anymore because the on-off switch for here is now on the back of the units. This is always left in the on position. And just another shot of just everything trying to be put into place. This is what takes the most time out of everything. It's not so much wiring all the parts. It's trying to figure out where you want everything to go so it sits right. You can see in this is an older photograph, still the speaker up here, I hadn't moved it yet. But a lot of time of trying to figure out where I want everything to go, where's the battery going to fit, where's the sound volume going to go. That's what takes most of the time. I finally settled on, again, something like this, where the Adafruit and the battery's down in here. This will come down here in the door area for the battery compartment. And again, you can see I finally put that bead of hot glue on the display cable here, just to help with tension. It's being pulled a little bit, but this will just help relieve some of the strain. And I put down more beads of hot glue just to make sure nothing moves at all, especially the wires. Once these guys are on, you don't want them getting pulled off and having to reopen it and find out where everything went again. It's better to put some hot glue down now and keep it in place. You can see here I closed the back door temporarily. You can see the little on-off switch I put in here, the turbo button for the A button, the reset button over here, and on the back door I simply got a little micro USB breakout board that it goes to a regular micro USB cable. I just took the plastic cover off and soldered the 2 wires onto the back of the door. So when you want to charge it, just unscrew it and you can plug it in. Now I can always cut a little notch here and put it in, so I don't have to even do that. But I tried to keep it looking as stock as possible. And you can see here it's just a ground wire for the black, the 5 volts coming in on the red, going inside to the Adafruit 500C charging circuit, which will charge the batteries. And you can see I hot glued the volume potentiometer here again. I could have put it somewhere on the outside, but again I was trying to keep this looking as stock as I could. And if you want to adjust the volume, which you don't have to do too often, but if you do, take a screw out, adjust the volume, and you close it right back up. And that's how it looks until I put some decals on it. You can see here there's a decal on here, and I probably could have just washed it off. I actually tried using a hairdryer, because that's normally what you do, is to heat the adhesive to get it to come off. This plastic was so thin I was kind of worried this was going to happen, and it did. It warped it a little bit. It's not too bad, but it did do it. And I always, every project I have, I see it in one of my videos, there's always one little thing I screw up in them, and this was this one. I just heated it a little too much, and it got hot and it started to warp. Nothing I can do about that now. So now that our project is completed, here's what the original Super Breakout looked like before any modifications. Now next to the Glen's Retro Show Mini-Cade on the right hand side, you can see the screen is a little bit larger. And now with the powered on, the original Breakout LCD on your left, and the Glen's Retro Show with the Game Prince on the right. You can see that the screen really does have really good color. The sound works really well. It's basically an NES on a chip, so you expect pretty good graphics and sound, and this does deliver that. The joystick works extremely well, and it's been a lot of fun. So now that we've seen some still photographs, let's get some pictures of the Game Prince Glen's Retro Show Mini-Cade in action.
I can't get it. I can never do this. Oh no, I'm afraid. I think it's going to be on YouTube. Oh no, I'm dead.
So I hope you all enjoyed this video of me converting a Game Prince and an MGA Super Breakout into a Glen Retro Show Mini-Cade. It was a pretty fun little project. It was something I'd wanted to do for a little bit of time, and had a little time to work on it, and well, here's the results. It came out pretty well, I think, aside from the one little error here on the battery cover, but I made a couple of decals on it as well. And the battery life's been pretty good. I'm getting between 2.5 to 3 hours on a charge on the battery pack, which is pretty acceptable, I think, for the size of the battery. The joystick is very responsive. The sound and pause button in the lower right-hand corner are your A and B buttons. The on and off button is a reset to get you back to the main menu. And then the start right button is your select for the game. All the buttons are represented. The only one I put on the back was the turbo button for A, which is not really always needed. But when you're playing Gradius or something like that, that turbo button does come in handy, let me tell you. Even has a great little version of Dig Dug. So I'm pretty happy with this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope my instructions will help you on your own project. I try and go into detail, but sometimes it's really hard to go into super detail because it's hard to take a photograph or to really get every single thing you do. But I hope my videos are a good reference point to help you along with your particular projects. So this little Mini-Cade is in addition to my other Mini-Cades which I've already made, which was the Basic Fun Pac-Man, Basic Fun Space Invaders, and the 201 and 301 that I've already completed. And I'm currently working on an Excalibur Family Guy pinball machine that I'm going to turn into a Missile Command and Crazy Climber unit. So expect more videos from me to follow on this, but also I'll be doing videos on other things as well, including my classic machines like my Bally Astrocade, Magnavox Odyssey, old classic TVs, and other retro items. So again everyone, thank you for watching, I really appreciate it. Please, if you did like the video and you feel you want to, please like, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Also, if you do decide to make your own Mini-Cade, all I ask is you simply give a nod and give some acknowledgement that you saw my video that helped you along with your project. Not only makes me feel good to know I helped you out, but it does hopefully spread out my channel to get more people to subscribe, which is kind of nice. I want to really help as many people as I can, and I like getting feedback from all my subscribers. So again, everyone have a great day, and remember, game on.
Oh no, I'm afraid.
I think it's going to be on YouTube.